I've tested 5 different cycling products, all costing much more than the standard alternatives, to find out if they're actually worth it or not. Be sure to watch to the end because the last one, in my opinion, is a little bit silly, but we're going to start with a piece of clothing.
This jacket costs $600 or £450, and it's a very nice winter jacket, don't get me wrong. It's made by Q36.5 and it's called the, I'm going to butcher the name of this, but the Dottore Termico. That's what I'm going to go with anyway. It's the brand's flagship winter jacket and it features 11 different proprietary fabrics. It's said to operate best at between -5 and +5 degrees Celsius, and right now it's probably about that. The jacket has a lot of things that I would consider to be standard features. So you've got 3 pockets at the back and an extra zipped one for something like your keys and your wallet. But this jacket, costing $600, in my eyes should have some pretty cool extra features. And good news, it does have some.
The first one that we will speak about is this rather unique feature, which is I don't know how best to describe it, but it's an internal extra fleecy vest. Now it's stitched into the jacket itself and it only covers the torso. But essentially it's the fabric you'd usually tend to find on a winter long sleeve thermal jersey. It's a very fleecy, soft fabric on the inside. And like I say, it only covers the front. But when you open it up and you look inside, you can then start to see where some of these proprietary fabrics are coming from, because the whole jacket is basically lined with this very funny looking kind of hexagonally insulated kind of mesh fabric. Now, when I was using this jacket, I will definitely say it kept me very warm. Here in the UK at the moment, the temperatures are bouncing around freezing. And what surprised me was that underneath this jersey, all I actually needed to wear was a base layer. The first few times that I was using it, I was going out with a base layer and a short sleeve jersey underneath. I just kept overheating every time. I was getting really hot and sweaty. I ditched that short sleeve jersey, just stuck to a summer base layer, might I add, and I found that that was perfect for keeping me cool. The thing I liked about that was that I didn't need to have all of these different layers to keep me warm, and it didn't feel quite as tight and constricting. I still had a good amount of movement, which I did quite like. Other features of this jacket are that it does have reflective panels across the arms and the back. I'm not going to say that justifies the price tag. You can find a very cheap reflective jacket these days, but it is nice that it's been included. This jacket is available, I think, in 3 different colours, but I think the ice grey colour works quite well for winter. It just makes it a little bit more visible. Going back to that inner liner, that inner fleece liner, because it zips right up to the top of your neck, I think that's what does the really good job of keeping the heat in. Q36.5 doesn't claim that this jacket is waterproof, and I think that is a bit of a shame at this end of the market. They do say that it's water repellent and wind repellent, and I will happily vouch for both of those. I haven't been out in a full-on downpour in this, but also they're not claiming it to be waterproof, so I would expect some water to be coming in through the seams. I'm a big fan of the zips that they've used. Some zips on some jackets can be so fine and so easy to catch in fabric and pull apart, and you can kind of tell when they're going to break early, but these ones feel very robust, and I think that's a really good thing because zips, for some reason, always seem to be the thing that go first. Do I think this jacket is worth the $600 or £450 that it's listed at? It's really hard to say, because Q36.5 clearly likes to position itself at the premium end of the market. And as a brand, if you want to do that, you do have to have high prices. But does that mean for you at home, you need to spend that amount of money to get this level of functionality? In my opinion, I don't think you do. Why? I found an alternative. This is the Santini PowerShield Pro all-weather jacket, and it costs, yes, it's still a lot of money, £250, but that does make it a near 40% saving on the Q36.5 jacket. It's been around for a little bit longer. I think I've had this now for a couple of years, and it's made with a Polartec fabric. The reason why Santini released this one was in response to the banning of PFAS and forever chemicals that you often find on Gore shape-dried jackets. So this jacket is claimed to be fully waterproof, and I have been in a full-on downpour in it, and I can tell you that it is definitely waterproof. It's a little bit mind-boggling because this jacket, it looks like a soft shell, so it looks like it should just absorb everything, but actually the water just runs right off of it. This jacket doesn't have quite the same level of padding as the Q36.5 jacket does, but I've still found that you can just get away with wearing a base layer with this jersey. I would opt for a winter base layer though, so something that's a bit longer and a little bit thicker, but that will be absolutely sufficient because this, again, has kept me incredibly warm. I have spent my fair amount of time in cheaper jackets as well, things that are ranging from 50 to £100, and they definitely don't do the same job of more premium jackets like these. You always tend to be sacrificing on something, be that the fit, the breathability, the materials, or how weatherproof or waterproof it actually is. So in this instance, I don't think you need to spend as much money as $600 or £450 for the Q365 jacket. I think other brands have some really great alternatives that, sure, they do cost a lot, but they still deliver a similar level of performance without needing you to really layer up to keep the heat in. Next up, we have a product which I never saw coming, and it was a bit of a surprise when it landed in my inbox at the end of December. I managed to get my hands on it and test it, and it is this tiny little thing from BBB Cycling. What it is essentially a glorified valve cap. It's designed to replace both your valve cap and valve core on a Presta valve. So what you do is you unscrew the valve cap, you take out the valve core, and then you replace it with one of these. Now, why would you do that? Why would you spend money on something which you already have and likely isn't causing you any issues, potentially? Well, BBB claims that one of these allows you to get in 300% more airflow into your tyres. Now, I can definitely see that as being a benefit for tubeless users. Everyone knows that when you're trying to set up your wheels tubeless and you're trying to inflate them, you need to get as much air in as possible, as quickly as possible. And these could, in theory, certainly help when you're doing that. Now, you will notice that the top of the head doesn't look like a Presta head. It's because it's not. What it's essentially done is convert your Presta valve into a Schrader valve, which I did think was really interesting because my track pump, I don't think I've ever used the Schrader side of the pump other than when I'm filling up the air in my car tyres. So it's highly underutilised. The Presta side is looking pretty beaten up. So it's been nice to use that side of my track pump for something other than my car. However, this one is definitely only for those who are running tubeless. As a few of you might know, I have switched to using TPU tubes on my road bike, and that means that the outside of the valve isn't threaded. So you can't screw one of these on because this relies on the threading that is on the outside of a tubeless valve. However, the benefit of using one of these is that you massively reduce the chance of clogging up your valves when you use a traditional valve core like this, which sits in the middle in the inside. What's nice is that you can buy the core cap as an upgrade set, so if you already have some tubeless valves on your bike and you just want to change the heads, then you can buy these and pop them on. Now, for what is essentially a valve core and valve cap, it's not cheap. $17 or £15. When you compare that to a valve cap and valve core, which is basically free, if you lost them and you went to a local bike shop, they'd probably give them to you for free. It does make these actually quite a pricey thing to purchase, purely for the sake of potentially not clogging up your valves. That said, as a total sum, £15 or $17, it's really not too much money, and I think it does make for a nice little upgrade. Using them was super simple, and switching over to this upgrade kit, again, was super simple to do. And actually one thing I do really like is the colour of these because they really match the sidewalls of my tyres, so if anything, it's just a nice bit of bling. If you're concerned about weight, they're really not too heavy. If anything, they're probably similar to what a valve core and valve cap is combined. The only downside of these, and I don't know if it really is a downside, but trying to get air back out of an inflated wheel if you need to drop the pressure, it's quite hard to do because when you press it, there's not much to press on, and when you can press it, it only opens up the smallest hole. So there's two ways you can look at it. Either, if you're often completely deflating your tyres, then it's going to take a while to do it with one of these. However, on the other hand, if you do just want to make kind of fine adjustments, then you are able just to let out really small bits of air at a time. Of course, if you did want to just completely deflate your tyres, then you can always just fully unscrew this and then all the air will come out. But yeah, in this instance, I would say that this expensive option is probably worth it. Right, speaking of inflation, TPU tubes. This is something I've wanted to speak about for a little bit of time now because I've had a few comments and questions asking which tubes I've been using. I've been using these. These are the Pirelli Smart Tubes. I have no affiliation with Pirelli, but I'd heard that they were decent, so I got them and actually I've been pretty happy with them. However, I was perusing on Amazon for alternatives and I found these, and these have fascinated me because not only are they much cheaper, these cost generally somewhere in the region of 20 to 30 pounds each. These cost about £5 each. So there's a massive saving to be had here. Now, when I bought them, I was thinking that these, although they were TPU tubes, I thought they were just going to be really heavy. No. These are lighter than the Pirellis. The Pirellis weigh in at 37 grams each, and I believe these tip the scales at 33. Tiny saving, but the fact is they are on par. When I started to look at them a little bit more closely, they're really quite indistinguishable. The valves look really similar. Both are plastic valves, both have traditional valve cores. And then my other key point that I wanted to look at was where the valve actually meets the tube itself. And both of them have reinforced plastic rings at the base of the valve to make for a clean transition between tube and valve. And when you feel it in your hands and you run it through your fingers, both feel really versatile. Right now, I have one of these cheap ones in my front tyre and I have one of these Pirelli tubes in the back tyre. Of course, I can't feel a difference. The fact is, the tubes are inflated. These were super easy to fit. They caused no more problems than these Pirelli tubes did. So in my mind, this one is a bit of a no-brainer. If you want to go TPU, do not spend as much money as 20 to 30 pounds on a tube. Just get some of these. If you want to find them, then I have dropped a link in down below. But so far, I'm impressed. Anyone that knows me well knows that I have a very keen sweet tooth, which is why I ultimately love cycling. It's because I can just eat loads and loads of sugar, which is the dream. Now, I stumbled across a new type of energy bar from One Good Thing, OGT. Now, the whole deal with these guys is that they do energy bars that are wrapper free. So how do you transport them? Well, they are actually covered in a beeswax coating. And these little square things, there's about 25 grams of carbs in one of these, and it's got this beeswax coating. So if you were to get it dirty and you wanted to wash it off, I think the idea is you can just simply run it under some water or squeeze some of your bottled water over it, and then it's clean and then you can eat it. Now, these aren't that cheap if you buy them as a one-off purchase. If you're to buy a box of 12 squares, it's going to cost you in the region of about £27. Now that is quite a lot of money for 12 energy bars. I think the question you've probably all got is, what are they like to eat? Well, they're fine. The energy bar on the inside of the beeswax, delicious. I think the flavours are absolutely brilliant. They're really tasty. But the one thing I just can't get over is that beeswax coating. It doesn't have a flavour, but there is a texture and you can kind of feel it on your teeth a little bit. It does rip quite nicely, so you're not kind of smearing the inside of your mouth with this beeswax, but you know it's there. And for me, there is a bit of a mental hurdle of putting unwrapped food in my pockets when I'm getting sweaty and a bit gross and could be riding through poor weather and all these different things. I think the idea is great. Any opportunity to get rid of plastic out of the environment is great. Ultimately, I see far too many gel wrappers and bar wrappers out in nature, which is obviously not good and not something anyone should be doing. But for the costs, I think it is a bit too high. You can reduce that cost quite significantly because OGT have a subscribe and save functionality. But deep down, I have this real aversion to subscribing to something because I like variety and I like choosing things, and I just want to be able to buy things on my terms. And I think subscription services, they're often posed as convenience and low hassle, but actually it feels like a bit of a burden and as though you're actually catering to a business's cash flow more than it is there to serve you. So that is why I actually tend to go for things like this. This is something from Deliciously Ella. These are peanut oat bars. They actually have pretty similar macros to the OGT. I tend to veer away from sports-specific energy bars. I find they just cost too much. Ultimately, I want to go to the shop, get a Kit Kat, Snickers and a Twix and eat that instead because that gives me more joy on the bike. Like I say, I have a killer sweet tooth, so I want to eat chocolate and sweets as much as possible. While I do think the OGT bars are good, I just can't get behind it from a cost point of view. And again, I'm really struggling with that mental hurdle of unwrapped food in my sweaty jersey pocket. Finally, it's time for my last expensive product, and this is the Camelbak Podium Steel Bottle, and it costs £40. Of course, if you're going to run 2 bottles on your bike, that's going to total £80. But this is one of the most ridiculous things that I have ever tested, and it blows my mind that it's sold for cyclists for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's metal, so you can't squeeze it. I'm sure some of you are wondering then, how do you actually use it and drink out of it? Well, it's got a locking mechanism at the top, and then there is a straw attached to it on the inside, and this allows airflow back into the bottle. So when you turn the bottle upside down and the lid is open, airflow will rush inside the bottle and the liquid will come out. But it means you have to have this thing upside down, or at least pointing down into your mouth, to allow that to work. You wouldn't be able to have the bottle down in front of you, squeeze it and drink. You really have to put your head back to get the liquid in. The other thing, this bottle weighs 374 grams, whereas a similar sized plastic water bottle like this one weighs just under 100 grams. This is essentially 300 grams heavier than this. And again, when you double that up across 2 bottles, you're then carrying an extra 600 grams on the bike, just in bottle weight. That's insane. Camelbak does make this bottle in a lot of different colours, and I think they do look really nice. Until you've used it for a few rides, because then the outside starts to get really scratched up, and actually what was quite an expensive purchase suddenly turns into something that looks a little bit tatty and not that great. I cannot think of a feasible situation where it makes sense to purchase a bottle like this. The only thing I can think of is if you're riding at the peak of summer in the desert or Australia or somewhere like that, where you actually really need to stay cool and you need to have an ice cold drink with you for hours on end. But otherwise, this is one I think to definitely avoid. I want to say a big thank you to all the new subscribers that have joined the channel recently. I appreciate you doing so. If you haven't subscribed already, I would really appreciate it if you could. I'm really keen to try and hit 10,000 subscribers as soon as possible. On that note, let me know if you've got any expensive products that you've used, which actually ultimately realised probably weren't worth it.